wants to try and connect with the fans. You know, that's really key. Actually, it comes across in every conversation, you know, I've had either individually or collectively with him. He can see that this club, you know, is ready for liftoff and it needs real togetherness. I think what we will see in the next window is some of the players that were linked to Villa in this last window, Villa going back in for them. The one exception, Gerard Deulofeu, told there is no interest in him, despite some of the links to the Udinese winger there.
The 1874 Show by the Villa View.
Hello, welcome to 1874 on the Villa View. We are no longer on the Athletic, but Greg and I missed speaking to each other so much, we thought we'd bring it back on the Villa View, and people seem to miss it on social media as well. So it was something we were keen to get back going again. This show is sponsored by Luke Roper. If you want to get 20% off everything Luke Roper has to offer, including this T-shirt that I'm wearing, get the badge in, then all you have to do is use the code TVV20 and you'll get 20% off everything on the Luke Roper website. I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend, global Gregg Evans. I found, Greg, that since we stopped doing 1874, we've not spoken as much. I don't know whether that's purposeful on your behalf. I know you have been very busy over the last few months, in fairness, but we don't talk as much nowadays. So it'd be good to do a podcast because I'll actually get to talk to you.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thanks for having me back. It's good to talk to you a little bit more. No, we haven't really spoken much, have we? And you don't look any better looking from when we last used to speak anyway, so not much has changed there.
No, I need a haircut, in fairness. I do need a haircut. That's probably not helping with the looks, and a shave. So neither of those things are helping, Greg. You're looking fresh, to be fair to you. It's worth saying at this point that we know 1874 used to be an audio-only podcast, but people did used to say they'd like it to be video. So what we're planning to do is give people the option. So you can either watch it on YouTube, like all the other Villa View content, you are now, if you can see our faces, you're watching it on YouTube, but we are going to make sure it's out on time on all the audio platforms as well, because we know that's how people used to digest the content. Greg, we'll start with, I don't want to start with it, but we will. We'll look at Villa's defeat to Leicester at home on Saturday at Villa Park. I assume you're in the press box. As I say, I don't speak to you as much anymore, so you'd have been in the press box. I was in my seat in the Holt end. A bad day at the office for Villa, but we were just saying before we came on, in some ways now, looking back, it's now Monday. I'd rather Villa got all the mistakes out the way in one game rather than making a mistake every game and losing different games.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, actually. It's very unusual to see so many individual mistakes in one game. And if you look back at all four of the goals, I think three of the goals definitely came through mistakes. You could probably say four as well. But yeah, I think there's an element of bad luck to the result. I thought Villa played well going forward. Defensively, they weren't great. You know, we know that. But I think over the course of the season, or certainly the time that Emery has been in charge, Villa have been impressive. So as a mid-table team, they're going to have ups and downs. You know, there are going to be games where they don't win, and they're going to turn out like Saturday. That's just how it happens for evolving teams that are looking to push on and get closer to those top 6 or 7 positions. So it's a long process for Villa. I think the key is how they react. And yeah, it's just a shame that we're starting the first podcast on a defeat, because we seem to be speaking.
As vintage, it's perfect. That's what we do.
Before. I mean, we did this for a couple of years, that Villa lost more games than they won, didn't they? So let's not hope that's the start of a new trend either.
But 5 wins from 8, there can't have been many times in your time covering Villa that Villa have won 5 in 8, in fairness, off the back of what you just said as well. So I get some of the reaction, the frustration with the way Villa have lost the game, the fact it was to a team that's been fighting relegation as well. It's at home, so there's the frustration of that. I think Villa haven't had a good year, 12 months at home, really. Looking back over it, so haven't won many home games over the last 12 months. So I get the frustration. But 5 wins from 8, when you look at the fixtures Villa have had, there's some splendid results in there.
Yeah, look, it's a great run of results, 5 out of 8, which is why I think supporters now are looking back on it as a whole. As a package, they're looking at the 8 games. They're not looking at Saturday's result. I mean, I don't blame anybody who went and paid their money at Villa Park on Saturday for getting frustrated with the result. I'm sure you were yourself, Dan. Walking out of there, but
that was all right.
you quickly forget about it when you look at the big picture. And I think the way Emery has come in and he's taken the club away from relegation bother. I mean, there's no Villa fans out there really that are concerned now about getting relegated, are they?
You'll be surprised. I've actually seen a few because we've got Man City and Arsenal.
I'm not reading the sentiment well enough then. Okay, I mean, look, there's 2 tough games coming up, of course, but I just feel personally that Villa are looking much more upwards now rather than nervously over their shoulder. I feel that they've proven in the games that they've played that they can see off some of these lower opponents and pack a punch against some of the better teams as well. So it'll be interesting these next 2 games. I think Emery's got to take it back a little bit, almost go back to basics, because as I wrote in my article on The Athletic today, it just felt that he got a little bit carried away, or maybe the team in general. Clearly he wanted to give the supporters a complete performance. He wanted to really entertain them at home, to have more possession, to attack on the front foot, to attack consistently. That's what he'd called on for his players throughout the week, and it just backfired a little bit because they just lost some of the things that they'd done so well in the previous weeks, and that just made them a bit more vulnerable defensively.
Yeah, Villa have always been terrible from behind over the last few years, but under Emery, that's the first game where they've gone ahead and they haven't taken anything. I think it might be the first one where they haven't won the game from going ahead, actually. So, yeah, like you say, he's made a few changes, Emery, because he seems to want this connection with the fan base, wasn't he? But to be fair, it's ended up kind of having the opposite effect because the fan base was very, very frustrated. It's almost like the way they've been set up to play away has obviously worked perfectly, because they've won every game away from home under Emery so far. Because he's trying to move away from that at home and try something different. Do you think it's almost a case of we're not quite there yet, we're not quite ready?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just, a bit of realism, really. I think realising that Villa are still a mid-table team, looking to press on, and there are going to be days where they win some games and weekends where they lose. That is simply the case. Leicester are a very good team with. They had a little bit of fresh impetus with Tete coming in, a couple of new signings, and it clearly made a difference for them. And listening to Brendan Rodgers in his press conference after, he was delighted that he was able to get a few players in and just freshen up that squad, and he felt that was the real difference. So yeah, I think that what Emery wants is he wants a real connection with the Villa supporters. He knows that so many want to go to the games home and away. He knows that when Villa are winning, the fans are in full voice, and he wants to really buy into that, and he wants the players to embrace that and almost drive the supporters forward. There's so many there that are willing to get behind the team and are really ready for liftoff, but they need the performance from the players to do that, and I think that's what Emery's trying to get. It's going to take time. There are players there that are playing better than they were when they're even Gerrard. You look at other than the weekend, you look at the centre backs there, that they're playing much better. I think Emi Buendia was starting to really see what he is as a player. Now I think Ollie Watkins is starting to get his confidence back a bit as well, scoring lots of goals. I thought he was excellent on Saturday. He comes under a lot of criticism from supporters sometimes, but I think that the Leicester backline really struggled with him. But it's just getting everyone to believe in it, and hopefully it will work eventually.
You wrote something in your piece this morning. I read it this morning that I said last night on the Villa View on our post-match point show, actually, that when Villa, people talk about the centre-backs and playing out from the back and them being the problem, but actually the 3 goals that Villa have made mistakes for in terms of playing out from the back have come when giving it to the central midfielders. That's 3 different central midfielders that have made mistakes now and cost us goals. Where do you sit with that at the weekend? Because I think Kamari almost got himself out of it and then tried to go again when he should have just cleared his lines at that point, but he had another go at trying to play out. Martinez has played the ball into him, a bit like the Douglas Luiz one against Brighton. Do you think he should be playing the ball there? Because Konsa and Mings seem pretty well set, and it's almost like the central midfielder should be a decoy in that situation.
Yeah, I look at it in 2 ways. I think perhaps Martinez should see that there are 3 players quite close to Kamara, so maybe that's not the best option. Secondly, if the ball does come to Kamara, I think he's got enough time, to quickly pass it into one of the centre backs either side. He tries to take that extra touch and go round and sort of wriggle out of it. I noticed later on in the games he did that a couple of times in the centre of the pitch and successfully got away from players. So I like that. I like that in him. You know, he's very brave. He wants to take those risks, even on the back of a mistake. But I just think it's going to take a little bit of fine tuning. You know, Villa need to have all their players very, very confident playing out from the back. And clearly, it's not quite working yet because three times they've made mistakes. You know, Dendoncker against Stevenage, Louise at Brighton, and Kamara at the weekend. And Kamara again, you know, was dispossessed in the middle of the park, wasn't he, for the third goal?
Third, yeah.
So, you know, he probably had one of his worst games in a Villa shirt, but we know that what an exceptional player he's going to be. So it's just working on it, getting the players really on board with it, really confident, and also not being afraid to just kick it long from time to time. It's not the end of the world. Emery
really doesn't want that, though, does he?
Emery doesn't want it every single time. But there are times where, you know, as players, you can take that upon yourself and get rid of it. You know, I look at it and I think Villa are 1-0 up. They've just scored. And the aim is to try and keep possession, because that's what they've done so well previously when they've gone ahead in the lead. They've almost killed the game and just tried to dominate possession as best as they can, pass it between themselves at the back, and try to encourage teams on. You know, if you look at the I forget the game, one of the home games where they went 1-0 up and then scored again straight after, when the other team was it the Leeds game? They go,
you know, I can't remember. It's a great podcast there. I can't remember. Manu, possibly.
I'm sorry.
It's Manu. They went 1-0, 2-0.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It
wasn't it?
The Tottenham game. The Tottenham game I'm thinking of. They went 1-0 up, brought Matt Cash on to act as another sort of defender to protect the back line, but he played slightly forward. And the way they managed the game there, they created gaps that allowed them to get the second goal. So I think that was part of the plan on Saturday, but it just didn't work.
Yeah, he likes that right person who's playing on the right hand side to drop in and make an extra defender at times. Emery does now. I mean, there's so many things I'm fascinated by tactically from Villa, and I think that's one of the big things. At least I can see tactics now, and at least when they lose, I can still come away and still feel okay about it, because I can see that there is a plan and they're trying to move forward. Whereas when they were losing games earlier in the season under the previous manager, I was coming away thinking, what have they done all week? I'm literally saying nothing here to get behind. So at least now, you know, they lose, but I've still seen elements of play that I've liked from Villa. The thing I really disliked, my biggest pet peeve from that game from Villa, was the fact that it was just they didn't learn. So they've made a mistake for the first goal. They didn't learn, because the third goal was kind of similar to the first goal. Martinez came flying out for the third goal as well, which I didn't think was the right thing to do. And then he didn't learn for the fourth. He came flying out as well. So it was almost like they just didn't learn from things as the game went on and just continued to make mistakes. It's almost, and now 40 minutes, you're winning the game 2-1. So you've been given a reprieve from your first mistake, and you've got a lucky goal because you're 2-1 up with 40 minutes. There's no way on earth you should be going in 3-2 down when you're 2-1 up in 40 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's perhaps the most frustrating part of it. You know, Villa have, when they've taken the lead, and a lot of the times it's been late in game under Emery, they've successfully managed to hold on to that lead, and they've done it really well. They've packed the defence. They've often added another defender in there, whether it be another left back or right back. I mean, I remember the Man United game. John McGinn was dropping back as a left back. Matt Cash had pushed over to another centre back. I think it was Jacob Ramsey had come back to a right back. So they were playing like almost a 6, even at times 7-man defence. And that was just helping them hold on to the game. They didn't really do that against Leicester. Now, I can understand why they didn't do it for the first goal, because it's so early in the game. And Emery wants this complete performance where he really starts to try and entertain the fans. So they're looking for more goals. But the second goal, when they're 2-1 up, maybe that should have been the time where they just thought, right, let's kind of try and hold on to this a little bit now and see where we can go from there. I don't blame Martinez too much for the fourth goal, as you mentioned there, Dan.
I think he came flying out. I think he makes up the mind of the attacking player by doing that. That's
I'm not too sure. I just think because Moreno had missed the ball, you know, another individual mistake that on any other day probably just, you know, controls and clears it. We don't even talk about anything like this. I think Martin has just had to react to it and try to do his best and it wasn't enough. Pratt had a tap in the end, didn't it? So
Yeah,
look,
I thought Martinez was kind of saying himself at the end of the game that he was kind of looking at himself a little bit. Maybe he was just being kind because he didn't want to single anyone out and he was making it a collective thing. But I thought that was quite telling at the end of the game that just, I just think he made the forward players' mind up by coming out for both goals. The goals aren't his fault because there was plenty of stuff happened before it got to him. I just think if he'd held his ground a little bit, then it stops. It doesn't give the player the option to go around. By doing that, I think for the third and fourth, it made up the player's mind to go around him. They've kind of gone around him for the first as well, haven't they? So he'll be disappointed because at the end of the day, he didn't make a save in the game, did he, Martinez? I think they put a couple wide, Leicester, but other than that, every chance has gone in.
Yeah, and like spending some time with Neil Cutler, who used to be his goalkeeping coach, and learning a lot about him and what he's like in the week. That will really disappoint him. He'll be going through the debrief now, looking at those 4 goals, looking at ways where he can improve to try and save them, even though they're not really his fault. That's how dedicated he is to try to become better. And yeah, it was good to see him speak actually after the game, because in defeats, players often shirk the media responsibilities. That they're not interested in talking, which is understandable in some ways, because you don't want to face up to it when you've just lost. You're annoyed. So it was good to hear Martinez, because there were a couple of players in that squad who speak very well after defeats, and you really want to listen, and he's one of them.
Yeah, look, it's one of them, isn't it? They've won 5 from 8 is my motto at the end of it. So I'm happy with how things are going. They've definitely won more games than I expected them to. They're in a much healthier position than I would have expected them to be at this point, picking up some great results away from home. So Emery's solved a couple of things early doors in that our away form was terrible. We could never come from behind. We've done that a couple of times to rescue 3 points and a point in games. So, we're doing things that we haven't really done before. I can see that there's tangible improvement. I can see that they're working on stuff during the week. The sound bites coming out are very, very positive as well. And it's not in the usual way where it's just the stuff that football clubs churn out. There's genuine insight there, and from what players are talking about, that they are enjoying working under the new manager. Now, I know you, as a man, you probably didn't like covering Villa's results, but as a man, you enjoyed working with Steven Gerrard as a man of the press. What's Unai Emery been like?
Well, I've actually had some time off, so I'm still getting. I had most of January off on holiday. I did quite a lot of work at the back end of last year, covering some time in the World Cup. So I had a lot of time off. I spent some time with my close friends and family in January. So my time with Emery, at press conferences and in and around the training ground, has been quite short at the moment. So I'm still learning a little bit about him myself. But every press conference I've been to, I've been very impressed with him. I think his English is great. I like the way he wants to try and connect with the fans. That's really key. Actually, it comes across in every conversation I've had, either individually or collectively with him. He can see that this club, is ready for liftoff, and it needs real togetherness and every little extra percent will help. And he's really trying to get that connection between the players and himself and the fans. So I like that. He's very, very intense. From speaking to people at the training ground, he's in early, he's out late. He spends so much time ahead of games looking at opposition. He likes to pull players aside and alongside his coaches and go through various video drills with them. A lot of his coaches send individual clips to some of the players for them to improve on and help them understand where the manager wants them positionally. So, if it's a fullback, for example, then, the fullback will need to know where he needs to stand exactly when he's defending, where he needs to be positioned when he's attacking. And there'll be lots of clips that, that player will be sent to work on. Emery's spending a lot more time in hotels. He's
I know, sorry.
Oh, right, you did, didn't you?
Yeah, you can tell he's at the training ground, like, let me tell you, wasn't he in his dinner till about 9:30 at the hotel I saw him in. So, he's doing some late finishes at the training ground. That's definite.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he works very late, and a lot of his time is spent in hotels at the moment. But yeah, when they're collectively as a team, that there are a lot of long meetings as well during the downtime. You know, in between food and rest and recuperation time. So the players are having to take that all on board. You know, and it requires a big buy-in, total buy-in, really, from the team, because training can become a little bit monotonous, and when you're working on shape work every week, very regimented shape work, and you're listening to these long detailed video sessions, it can become boring at times. So you need to keep winning games, and the players are enjoying it to an extent because they're winning. But if they weren't winning, it started to become hard for them, I think. So yeah, that's the key. And I think the key is with any new manager, as you see, players are very keen to impress them early on, but then as the months come in, they get a little bit more relaxed. So this is quite a crucial time, I think, because the players will all be used to the new manager a little bit now, and those first impressions will be fading. It's down to them to continue to set the high standards.
Does anything? Well, this is just me asking a question on it, as obviously I know you've covered Villa for a long time. When the manager changes, like, you all have had a set routine of when you would go to Bodymoor Heath under the previous manager. The little things change, like the times that the press conferences are, or things that you have to do as a journalist when the manager changes.
I mean, there are things, not so much logistically like that. I mean, press conferences typically tend to take place on the same day. Often the manager will want it either in a morning or an afternoon session, depending on when he takes training. Some managers like to train late on a Friday afternoon if they've got a Saturday game, and sort of mirror the times rather than training in the morning. It just depends, really. With Emery, he takes a little bit longer after games. He likes to sort of address the players, take a little bit of downtime to think about sort of the message he's going to send out. Dean Smith was similar in that way. He always wanted a little bit of time to think about what he was going to say in the media, because that's where he addresses the fans. That's where a lot of the players listen to some of his comments, and where he either has to protect or dig out some of the players. So he's got a very big support staff around him, Emery.
Not bigger than Gerrard, surely. Gerrard had about 1,000 members of staff.
Well, it's growing.
Is it?
There is a big group there. Obviously lots of Spanish speakers, so it's a slightly different feel around the place. And not too many changes, but some little things.
The actual press conference is longer, because Unai Emery to me feels like he likes to go into a lot of detail from the bits I've seen of press conferences. So would he be one of the managers that has like a longer press conference, for example?
Yeah, I think quite similar. I mean, towards the end of Gerrard's era, the press conferences were just so tense, and not really an enjoyable place to be, because Villa were just losing so often. You could see this, manager that he wasn't broken, but he was getting towards the stage where there wasn't really much more he could say, because Villa just kept continued to lose. So they're more enjoyable in that respect, because things are a bit more positive. We're learning lots of new things. I like the way that Emery talks in detail about his sort of training regimes, what he wants from the players, how he's preparing for the game ahead. Doesn't give too much away tactically, but he's prepared to go into a lot of analysis and detail after. So that obviously makes it easier for journalists like myself to write detailed match reports after.
Should just say at this point, Gregg's audio is a bit funny at times there. We heard it, but he kept changing style. Gregg's got a microphone, but he's got a new laptop and he hasn't got the right adapter. So on the day one of doing this podcast, Gregg isn't using the correct equipment. So that was very, very disappointing to learn just before we were about to start. So apologies for that. But next week, Gregg will have the right equipment and he'll have his microphone plugged into his new laptop and will be good to go. Completely forgotten what I was going to ask you next at this point. Transfer window, that was where I was going to go. So you had an article last week about Villa's transfer window, just describing what happened. The good thing about doing this pretty much a week after the transfer deadline shut is your article's been out there for a while now. So I feel like you'll be able to go into a bit more detail with me than you would have perhaps been able to this time last week.
Yeah, I mean, it was a quiet end to the transfer window, wasn't it? And perhaps not what everybody expected. I mean, it's no secret that Villa were trying to bolster their attacking lines. They were looking at strikers, they were looking at wide players. Memphis Depay was a player that Villa looked at, but it became very clear that he wanted to go to Atletico Madrid when he was leaving Barcelona, so that one never really got going. Nico Williams at Atletico Bilbao, he's a player that Unai Emery still likes.
Hard to get players out of Bilbao, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very hard just because of the connection that they have with the club. Obviously, Williams' brother plays there and was on this ridiculously long run of appearances until he got injured a couple of weeks ago. So there's that connection there, and it was made very clear when that story broke in the national newspapers that Williams wouldn't be going anywhere in this window. Wouldn't be surprised if Villa go back in for him in this next summer window. Couldn't quite get to the bottom of whether Villa did actually bid the amount of money that was reported. There's certainly interest there, but we couldn't find out those finer details. Villa like to keep a lot of their transfer business private and very rarely brief journalists on these kind of things, and certainly the finer details anyway. So I think what we will see in the next window is some of the players that were linked to Villa in this last window, Villa going back in for them. The one exception, Gerard Deulofeu, told there is no interest in him, despite some of the links to the Udinese winger there.
Okay, interesting. Because he was heavily linked at one point. I feel as a fan, I know there's frustrations because fundamentally Villa's squad is now weaker than it was a month ago, I would suggest, just purely on the basis that Danny Ings has gone and purely on the basis of numbers wise as well. So Villa have lost some depth, but at the end of the day, they haven't lost anyone who was really offering anything in terms of minutes. So I feel quite at ease with Villa's transfer window, and the reason for that is, Greg, that if Emery had wanted someone, a winger or a striker, the money was there for that to happen. So Villa would have backed him. They would have given him the players that he wanted. I mean, that makes complete sense because Villa have moved heaven and earth to get Unai Emery in, and you don't bring a new manager in and then in his first transfer window not back him. He's got in the left back that he wanted, and then Villa have got a striker in who was a club signing, but Emery had also looked at himself, I believe. I think I read that in one of your pieces, actually. But Emery seems to want to wait for the summer because he'll be able to get a better level of player in the summer and get the player in that he wants, that suits what he wants to do better. So I feel kind of at ease with that. Is that the case? Is that where we are with Villa's transfer plans?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to clear up the John Duran signing, it was a club signing, as you mentioned, Dan. Yeah, how that particular signing worked was Villa's recruitment team, which is obviously led by Sporting Director Johan Langer, they presented John Duran to Emery. The fact that they were going to try and get him when he arrived, and Emery took that on board and thought that he would offer more at this point than perhaps Cameron Archer as a third striker. So the plan all along was to get another striker in alongside Ollie Watkins to act as some sort of support, and that Duran would be used as a third striker. But they didn't actually do that in the end. Villa, they decided that some of the players that they'd looked at were either not, viable financially, or would not actually be any of improvement or good competition. Strong enough competition for Watkins. So it ended up that Duran is now the striker that they will probably turn to a little bit more often than expected in the last 17 games of the season. And judging by his first appearance, he looked like he got a bit about him. He looked quite quick, so willing to put himself out there. Emery has said in his press conferences that he's been quite impressed with him, how he's been in training, and that the future's now. Okay, he might be a player who excels in 12 months' time, but Villa might need him next week, so he's going to be called upon, I think, a little bit more often. In terms of the other players that Villa looked at, yeah, I think if Emery had identified a striker for, say, £20 million, and he said to the owners that he wanted them, I think that Villa would have made that move for him. But that striker or that wide player wasn't available. So and a midfielder as well. Emery does want to strengthen the midfield. We know that Matteo Guendouzi was linked with the club. Villa didn't actually bid for him. There is just interest from Emery there.
Yeah.
And perhaps that might be another one that they might look at in the summer. But Marseille weren't willing to let him go on the cheap. They're pushing for the Champions League. They're doing well in Ligue 1. So he was going to be an expensive signing if he moved in January. I think as you say, Dan, that the squad has been left a little bit light, but there are enough bodies to cover if needed.
Yeah, obviously I was at Sky quite a lot over the January window, so I was speaking to quite a lot of French journalists. There's one prominent French journalist who's a Villa fan, Jonathan Johnson. I was speaking to him quite a lot, and he said exactly the same thing as you, that Marseille knew there was a strong interest in Guendouzi. I think they themselves were expecting a bid at some point, but that bid never materialised at any point. There was this strong interest, and Marseille were bracing themselves for Villa to come in and try and have a crack at signing him. But he's a player that, you know, if Emery does want him, someone he's worked with before. It's a player that knows Emery's methods. I thought he did well under Emery at Arsenal. If not getting that player in now and having to wait and get him in the summer, I'd rather they did that than just get someone in for the sake of it. Because Guendouzi, to me, he's not coming in to play where Luiz and Kamara are playing. He might do if one of them was to be injured. But because of the way Emery sets up, he's probably going to be one of those hybrid wide midfielder / centre midfielder / right back. Isn't he really? That would be the kind of job I would envisage him doing.
I think so, yeah. I think he'd fit into the role that McGinn and Ramsey have been in. You know, and if he becomes a target in the summer, we can do some more analysis on that.
I'd be shocked if they didn't go for him in the summer. Absolutely shocked.
I think they'll look to do a midfielder for sure. I mean, Marvelous Nakamba's obviously gone on loan to Luton. Hopefully they can recoup some money for him. He'll only have 1 year left. Morgan Sanson out at Strasbourg. That's probably the real big disappointment in terms of recruitment over the last 2 or 3 years. Sanson was a player that Villa had invested quite a lot of time and effort into, and £14 million, and they hoped that he would work, but it didn't quite work for them. But look, you know, you don't get every transfer right, and the way they held out for Boubacar Kamara, even though he had a bad game at the weekend, I'm sure we're going to see a very, very talented player in the future in him. Yeah,
a lot of people have obviously I put out on Twitter to ask you some questions. Tons of people asking about the transfer window. But Josh Ryan Ward saying, how much do you think Unai will get to spend in the summer? Do you think Villa will go big in the summer, Greg?
I'm not going to pretend to know that I know the exact budget because I don't, and Villa keep those sort of finer details private. But I'm told that there will be money to reinvest in the squad, to significantly strengthen a couple of areas that Emery wants to work on. The fact that they've got £12 million back for Danny Ings, with another £3 million coming if West Ham survive, that's £15 million towards a new striker, and Villa didn't want to waste that in the end in January. So that's a head start that they've got as well.
Yeah, I think we've reeled off a couple of players that have left the club there, and I think that tells me everything I need to know about the quality of those players, and would they be good enough to work under Emery? I mean, Nakamba's going to Luton at the end of the day. I'm not being disrespectful to him or to Luton, but if that's the peak of the teams that are interested in him, realistically, if you want to be a top half Premier League team, it isn't a loss. And again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, but if that's where he's ended up, you know, the players, Strasbourg, I've got no idea how they're going in France, but that's where Sanson's ended up going. You know, these players have left. But were they really offering anything anyway?
Well, this is it. You know, they weren't, were they? I admire Nakamba. It's a fantastic story from the way he was, from his upbringings and how he, how he progressed, and it became, I think, only the third Zimbabwean to play in the Premier League. You know, fantastic achievement for him. But he wasn't a player that was going to take Villa forward. You know, he was nowhere near the team in the end.
Even to Gerrard, he was nowhere near it.
No, he started really well, didn't he? And it was a little bit surprising that he never really got another chance like that. But clearly the managers have looked at him, spent time with him, and realised that there are better alternatives. And look, you know, he's gone to Luton Town, and we might mock the level that he's moved to, but they're still the 4th or 5th highest performing team in the Championship. So hopefully it works out for him, because he's one of the nicest, sort of, most kind, caring players that you will ever come across. Very, very respectable, polite young man. Somebody who was spoken very highly of by all the managers that he's worked under. And a credit to his country as well, because he gives a lot back to charity. So good luck to Marvelous, but unfortunately he wasn't taking Villa forward.
Yeah, good to see that dynamic midfield link up again of Nakamba and Lansbury. Villa fans fond memories of that midfield. Usually, when you let a load of players go and you don't particularly strengthen in January, you'd think, right, this might be a chance for youth players to come through. I don't know whether you've had a chance to ask anyone about this. Villa are obviously having 2 goalkeepers on the bench at the moment, which I always just find absolutely bizarre. Why not just put someone else on? I mean, Caden Young's been on the bench, but he wasn't on the bench at the weekend. I think he seems the most likely to be the next one coming through. But Villa it doesn't feel like there's that next player at the moment ready for the first team, ready to step up. Kane Castle-Hayden's ended up staying, hasn't he? But it doesn't feel like there's that next player off the conveyor belt at the moment, which is a shame, really, because now would be the time to give youth a chance if someone was ready. But I'm getting the vibe that there isn't anyone that's in that position at the moment.
Well, I mean, look, Dan, in all honesty, Villa's best youth players are out on loan, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, Cameron Archer and Aaron Ramsey are at Middlesbrough, who are 4th in the Championship. Jaden Philogene Badace is at Cardiff, another mid-table Championship club, or club that's, in the Championship, shall we say. Timo Rugbuna performing well. QPR, certainly at the start of the season. He's been moved back a little bit under Critchley now, and was definitely playing better in a more advanced role under Beale. But he's somebody that a lot of big clubs are actually looking at as well, and they're keeping an eye on him. No bid or anything like that for him, but they're certainly monitoring him because of his performances for England under 19s in the successful tournament last summer, and what he's doing in the Championship. There's also players like Lamar Bogard, Louis Barry. It hasn't quite worked out for him, but he's gone to Salford, and other players that are on loan. So what Villa have found is all their best players have been, they see a better pathway by sending them out on loan, helping them play regular men's football and increasing in value. So in the future, they will either be sold on for millions of pounds or potentially become squad players.
Yeah, Rakesh Pradhan was asking about the youth players on Twitter, so I've nicked your question, Rakesh, and put it in for myself. What about there's this Kortney Hause situation at the moment that I know the Athletic have been reporting on. I don't know if it's been used specifically. I think Adam Leventhal's been reporting on it. It seems like a bizarre thing at the moment that I've never really seen happen elsewhere before. Can you just explain what's going on with that at the moment?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, for the full details, I'd point you to the Athletic article. Myself and Adam Leventhal have been all over this and explaining it in full. So it'd be easiest to read it. But the situation is, Villa sent Kortney Hause out on loan. He picked up an injury during his loan spell at Watford. Watford have said that he's not going to be in the 25-man squad, and are happy to send him back to Villa. But Villa aren't interested in bringing him back because they've already planned for the season.
I think that's strange, actually. We've only got 3 centre-backs ourselves at the moment.
Well, I mean, Boubacar Kamara trained as a centre-back, didn't he, in the younger days, so can play there if an emergency. Diego Carlos is returning. Josh Feeney, they've got very high hopes for, so he could be called upon if needed. I think the Villa have got lots of backup options, Callum Chambers as well, if they really need to. They decided that Kortney Hause, was going to go out on loan. It was a season-long loan agreement, so I can understand from Villa's point of view why they don't want to bring him back. There's probably a little bit of stubbornness on both sides, but it's a business decision, and I can understand. The PFA have got involved now to see whether Kortney can have his treatment, where he can get his injury treatment, because he's going to be out for a good few more weeks, even if he does have the surgery. So yeah, go and have a read on the Athletic, and the full details will all be in there.
I think this is one of those situations where people have a go at players sometimes for being greedy and wanting to move and kind of caring about money and things like that. But it does show you that actually, there's situations where players don't get treated that well either. Kortney Hause is in a difficult situation here at the moment. It's probably really, really getting to and potentially getting to his mental health. So people talk about players and the way they treat clubs. I think sometimes it does happen the other way, and football can be fickle both ways. I
think players are often seen as robots, aren't they? They're expected to take everything and just deal with everything, and like it's easy for them, but it isn't. When your body's breaking down, for example, or you're not playing, or you have to move clubs because you're not getting game time, and you have to move to a different country, and you have to move all your family across, and you've got young children with you and things like that. People often don't see that. They just look at it and think, well, you're earning millions of pounds a year, you should be all right. But it's not as simple as that, is it, Dan?
No, he served Villa well. Kortney Hause, there'll be more spectacular players that play for Villa in the future and that have played for Villa. But he's been a good servant to the club, so I'd like to see him looked after and like to see that sorted out, because that situation is no good for anyone at the moment. In particular, Kortney Hause. Before we go, Greg, let's look ahead to Manchester City on Sunday. Then, Man City, I'm imagining, don't lose too many games in a row, and obviously they've lost to Spurs yesterday. Deserve to lose, really. I thought Spurs were the better team, managed the game very well on Sunday. Difficult task, but kind of one that I'm excited to see how Villa line up and how Villa approach it.
Yeah, I think Emery's record when he's manager of a lesser, a lower ranked club against some of the bigger boys in the division and he's very good. So it'll be interesting to see his tactical approach. I think it's a good time to play Man City. I watched the game against Tottenham too, and they just didn't quite seem right. Guardiola was there on the sidelines getting very, very frustrated. Clearly, his thoughts were the way he wants his team to play. He's not being replicated by his players at the moment. Thought Jack had a good game. Thought
he was their best player, wasn't he, by a mile?
Yeah, I thought he was probably, the most creative spark. So it'd be interesting maybe because it might be the first time he starts a game against Villa, mightn't it? So it'd be interesting to see how that dynamic works. But yeah, good time to play Man City actually, perhaps with some of the off-field problems as well. Yeah,
it does feel like ideal, Emery, like you say, so many European games where Villarreal went away to places and picked up results by having a really astute game plan. I am really interested to see what he comes up with against Manchester City, and they're not at the best at the moment. They're not the side that they've been for the last few seasons. The Jack point is interesting because it does feel like he's first choice at the moment. He's probably never felt like that in the time since he moved there. Obviously, I hope he has an absolute stinker, or that if he does have a good game, Villa still go on and win. But it'll be interesting to see him lining up against Ashley Young, I guess, because I guess that's who we'll be playing against.
Wow, yeah. I've just thought about that actually. Yeah, very interesting. I mean, somebody who he obviously grew up watching, didn't he? So
yeah,
it will be an interesting game.
Yeah, the paths never quite crossed at Villa. Although actually, when Ashley Young came back, Grealish would have still just about done a few training sessions with him when he came back from international duty. So the paths would have crossed briefly before Jack moved to Manchester City, but he'll have definitely spent some time watching him as a kid and enjoying his performance. Two of the best left-sided players Villa have had in my time supporting the club. I think that does us, Greg. So thanks ever so much for joining me. I've enjoyed talking to you again. Hopefully this podcast will offer what it used to offer on The Athletic and just offer something different to the other content that's out there on Aston Villa Football Club. As I say, I've enjoyed it. I've learned some stuff as well from Greg. Obviously, it's different, getting a proper journalistic perspective on what's going on at Villa Park. Watch this podcast on YouTube. You can listen to it on all the audio platforms as well. Fingers crossed. That's not up to me. I'm hoping they come out on time. We'll be back next Monday with another show, another episode of 1874. Thanks to Luke Roper. Thanks for watching or listening.